There is something you have carried for a long time that most people around you never seemed to understand. Something that made you feel, at different points in your life, like you were wired differently, like the rules everyone else seemed to follow effortlessly were written in a language you couldn't quite speak. While the people around you seemed to move easily between physical closeness and emotional distance, treating the two as separate compartments that didn't need to touch, you never could. You never could separate them. You tried, maybe. You watched how others did it. You told yourself to be more casual, more relaxed, more modern about it. And then something inside you quietly refused. Because for you, physical closeness without emotional safety didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exposure without shelter, like standing in a storm with no coat and being told you should enjoy the rain. And here's what nobody told you about that refusal. It wasn't a flaw in your design. It wasn't anxiety dressed up as preference. It wasn't immaturity or inexperience or some wound you needed to fix before you could participate in connection the way everyone else did. It was your psyche doing exactly what it was built to do, protecting the parts of you that matter most, requiring conditions that honor the depth of what you're actually capable of feeling. This video is for the people who have spent years wondering why they can't just relax into closeness the way others seem to. Why physical presence without emotional truth feels hollow or even threatening. Why they need to feel safe, genuinely safe, before anything else can open. This is for the people who have been told they're too guarded, too slow to warm up, too complicated, too much. This is for you. And before we go any further, I want you to hear something clearly. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not failing at intimacy. You are simply someone for whom intimacy means something real. And that is not a problem to solve. That is a truth to understand. Let's begin at the beginning, with what it actually feels like inside a nervous system like yours. Most people experience attraction as something that arrives relatively quickly and sits in the body first. There's a spark of interest, a physical pull, something that ignites before deep knowing has had a chance to develop. And for many people, that sequence feels natural. Desire first, then discovery. Chemistry as the starting point. Understanding as something that develops alongside or after. This is the dominant cultural story of attraction, and it's built into almost every romantic narrative we consume. You see someone across a room. Something happens. You move toward it. But for a significant portion of people, and this is far more common than culture acknowledges, that sequence is reversed. Or more accurately, the physical response is simply not available without a prior condition being met. That condition is emotional safety. Not just comfort, not just liking someone, not just finding them interesting or attractive in an abstract sense. Actual safety. The felt sense that this person will not harm what is tender in you, that their presence is trustworthy, that you can exist around them without having to guard yourself constantly. And until that safety is established, something in the body simply does not open. It isn't a decision. It isn't a choice made consciously. It is the nervous system doing its job, which is to protect you from harm by keeping the gates closed until the environment has been assessed and found safe enough to enter. This is not dysfunction. This is not avoidance. This is not fear masquerading as preference. This is the body's intelligence operating exactly as it should. The question is not why you work this way. The question is why we live in a culture that has decided this way of working requires an explanation or an apology. There is a concept in psychology called neuroception, a term developed by researcher Stephen Porges as part of his polyvagal theory. Neuroception is the unconscious process by which your nervous system is constantly scanning the environment for cues of safety or danger, not your conscious mind, not your rational thought. Your nervous system, operating below awareness, reading the room in ways you don't have access to, making assessments faster than thought, and sending signals up through the body that you experience as feelings, as a sense of ease or unease, as openness or contraction, as the quiet knowing that something is right, or the equally quiet knowing that something is off. For people who need emotional safety before physical closeness, this neuroceptive scanning is particularly active and particularly sensitive. Your system is not just reading whether someone is physically safe. It is reading whether they are emotionally honest, whether their energy is congruent with their words, whether there is something underneath the surface that doesn't match what's being presented, whether the emotional field around this person is stable and grounded or chaotic and unpredictable. And here's what's important to understand. You are not doing this because you're paranoid. You are not doing this because you've been hurt and now you're overprotective. You may have been hurt, and we'll come to that. But the sensitivity itself, the capacity to read emotional environments with this level of precision, is not a symptom of damage. It is a feature of a particular kind of nervous system, one that is more permeable, more attuned, more responsive to the invisible dimensions of human interaction. If this is already resonating with you, take a second to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what else is here for you. And let's keep going. People who are wired this way don't experience other people the way most people do. They experience presence. They feel the emotional texture of a room when they walk into it. They notice the slight tension in someone's voice that contradicts their relaxed posture. They pick up on what is not being said, sometimes more clearly than what is. And this capacity for deep perception means that physical closeness carries enormous weight for them. Because closeness is not just physical, it is exposure. It is allowing another person's emotional reality to enter your own. And for someone whose system absorbs that reality so completely, so fully, the question of whether that reality is safe to absorb becomes not optional, but essential. This is why emotional safety is not a precondition you've invented out of anxiety. It is the actual, biological, psychological requirement of a nervous system that experiences intimacy as full contact rather than partial contact. When you let someone close, you are not just letting their body near yours. You are letting their emotional world touch yours. And that is a profound act that deserves to be taken seriously. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in lived experience, because the theory is important, but the lived reality is where most of you have spent years trying to understand yourselves. You may have found yourself in situations where someone was objectively attractive to you, where you could recognize their appeal intellectually, where everything on the surface seemed right, and yet something inside you stayed closed, stayed still, stayed quiet in a way that felt almost frustrating, because part of you wanted to feel what you thought you should feel, and the feeling simply wasn't available yet. Not because it couldn't come, but because the conditions for it hadn't been established. And then, maybe there was another situation, a different person, someone where the conversation went somewhere real, somewhere honest, where they said something that revealed their actual interior rather than their curated exterior, where a moment of vulnerability passed between you, something unplanned and genuine, and you felt something shift, not just emotionally, in your body, a kind of opening that had nothing to do with a decision you made consciously, something that happened because safety had been established, and the part of you that had been waiting quietly for that safety finally recognized it and responded. That is the sequence for you. And it is not a slower or lesser version of attraction. It is a different architecture of it entirely. Psychologists who study attachment and intimacy have long recognized that for a significant portion of the population, emotional attunement is the primary pathway to physical desire. This is sometimes discussed in the context of what researchers call responsive desire, a term used by sex researcher Emily Nagoski to describe desire that emerges in response to context and connection, rather than arising spontaneously and independently of emotional conditions. Responsive desire is not less real than spontaneous desire. It is not a deficiency. It is simply desire that is organized differently, desire that requires the right internal and external conditions to emerge. And for people who need emotional safety, specifically, those conditions are not arbitrary. They are deeply tied to the architecture of how they experience intimacy itself. Safety is not a prerequisite they've placed before desire, as a kind of test or barrier. Safety is the soil in which their desire grows. Without it, nothing can take root. With it, something extraordinary becomes possible. But here's where it gets complicated. And here's where many of you have suffered in ways that were entirely unnecessary. We live in a cultural moment that has largely decided that requiring emotional connection before physical closeness is somehow old-fashioned, or neurotic, or evidence of unresolved issues. The dominant narrative around modern attraction celebrates spontaneity, casualness, the ability to separate the physical from the emotional as a sign of sophistication or freedom. And if you can't do that, if your system simply doesn't work that way, the cultural message you receive is that something is wrong with you, that you need to loosen up, that you're letting fear run your love life, that you're making things unnecessarily complicated. And many of you have internalized some version of that message. You've wondered if your need for emotional safety before closeness is really just fear wearing a more acceptable mask. You've questioned whether you're using depth as a defense mechanism, whether your requirement for trust before vulnerability is actually avoidance dressed up in psychological language. You've tried to override the requirement to push yourself toward openness before you felt ready, to prove to yourself and sometimes to others that you're not as guarded as you seem. And when you did that, when you allowed closeness before safety was established, how did it feel? Not in the abstract, in your body, in the days and weeks that followed. For most people wired the way you are, the answer is some version of wrong, off, hollow, like you had given something away that couldn't be retrieved, like you had allowed access to something tender before the conditions were right, and now you were managing the consequences of that. I'd love to know if you've had that experience. Drop something in the comments, even just a word or two. Was there a moment when you tried to override what you needed and your body told you clearly that you'd made a mistake? Your honesty down there creates something real for the people reading. That feeling is not guilt or shame, though those may have been present too. That feeling is your system communicating clearly that the sequence was violated, that the order of things matters for you in a way it doesn't matter for everyone. And that is not a moral judgment. It is not a statement about purity or propriety. It is simply the reality of how your particular nervous system is organized. And here's the truth most people miss. The fact that you need emotional safety before physical closeness is not a limitation on your capacity for intimacy. It is a description of the depth of intimacy you are actually capable of. Because the requirement for safety is inseparable from the quality of what becomes possible once that safety exists. Let's talk about what happens on the other side of safety, because this is where the story changes. When someone who needs emotional safety before closeness finally finds it, when they are in the presence of another person whose emotional reality feels honest and grounded and trustworthy, when the scanning of the nervous system finally returns a signal of genuine safety, what opens is not ordinary. It is not the mild warmth of comfort or the pleasant ease of familiarity. It is something far more immersive than that, because the same sensitivity that kept the gates closed while safety was absent is now operating in the presence of safety. And what that sensitivity does with safety and closeness combined is amplify everything. Subtle moments become significant. A particular quality of attention from the other person lands somewhere deep rather than glancing off the surface. Eye contact carries weight. Silence between you feels full rather than empty. Small gestures of care register with an intensity that might surprise even you, because your system is not filtering this experience the way a less sensitive system would. It is absorbing it completely. This is why people who need emotional safety before closeness often describe, once they have found it, a quality of intimacy that feels unlike anything they had access to before. Not because the other person is objectively extraordinary, though they may be, but because the combination of safety and sensitivity creates a depth of experience that is genuinely rare. The walls came down, not because you forced them down, but because the conditions finally made it safe for them to lower themselves. And what was behind those walls was not emptiness or damage. It was capacity, enormous, accumulated, waiting capacity for connection. Carl Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. For people who need emotional safety before closeness, this is not metaphor. It is literal experience. When genuine contact is made, when the emotional safety is real, and the closeness that follows is grounded in that reality, something transformative happens, not just between two people, but within the person who needed that safety. Something integrates, something that had been held in tension, the wanting of closeness and the requirement for safety, finally resolves. And in that resolution, a quality of presence becomes available that wasn't accessible before. This is the part that people who haven't experienced this kind of intimacy don't understand about you. They see the requirement for emotional safety as a wall. They don't see what's on the other side of it. They don't see that the wall is not a permanent structure, but a temporary condition. That it exists not to keep people out forever, but to ensure that the people who come in are coming into something real. Something that can hold them and be held by them without either person being harmed. And there is something else worth naming here. Something that sits underneath all of this that we haven't spoken about directly yet. Many of the people watching this video who need emotional safety before physical closeness have a history that explains, at least in part, why their system developed this particular architecture. Not all of them. Some people are simply wired this way from the beginning, with a nervous system that is more permeable and more attuned regardless of what happened to them. But many of you carry experiences, early experiences, of closeness that was not safe, of vulnerability that was met with harm or dismissal or betrayal, of environments where emotional safety was not a given, where you had to read the room constantly to anticipate what was coming, where the people who were supposed to be safe sometimes weren't. And what the nervous system does with those experiences is learn. It learns that closeness without safety is dangerous. It learns that emotional exposure before trust is established leads to harm. It learns to keep the gates closed until enough evidence of safety has accumulated to make opening reasonable. This is not pathology. This is adaptation. This is the nervous system doing its job under difficult conditions and doing it well. The challenge is that adaptations that protected you in one context can feel like limitations in a different context. The scanning that kept you safe in an unpredictable environment can feel like hypervigilance in a stable one. The requirement for emotional safety that was a reasonable response to unsafe experiences can feel in adulthood like an obstacle to the very connection you're longing for. But here's what's important to understand. The adaptation is not the problem. The adaptation is the body's wisdom. The work is not to dismantle it or override it or push past it. The work is to help your nervous system update its information, to have enough experiences of emotional safety being real, of vulnerability being met with care rather than harm, of closeness that honors rather than violates, that the system gradually learns it doesn't have to work as hard to protect you as it once did. This is slow work. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be forced by an act of will. It happens through experience, through relationship, through the accumulated evidence of being treated with care. And it is worth being patient with. Not because you are broken and need to be fixed, but because you are someone whose system learned to protect something precious, and learning to trust that the protection can sometimes be lowered requires time and gentleness and the right conditions. This is where it gets complicated in a different way. Because the need for emotional safety before closeness doesn't just affect how you enter relationships. It affects how you navigate them once you're inside them. And this is where many of you have encountered misunderstanding, sometimes from partners, sometimes from yourself. When you are in a relationship and something disrupts the emotional safety, when there is conflict that doesn't resolve cleanly, or a moment of dishonesty, or a pattern of emotional unavailability from the other person, your system responds the way it was built to respond. It begins to close, not dramatically, not necessarily with a conscious decision, but quietly. The openness that was present recedes. The physical dimension of the relationship, which was built on the foundation of emotional safety, begins to feel less available, less accessible. Not because you've stopped caring, not because the attraction has disappeared, but because the foundation has shifted, and your system cannot maintain openness on a foundation that no longer feels solid. And this can be profoundly confusing for partners who don't understand how you work. They may experience your withdrawal as rejection. They may interpret the closing as punishment or manipulation. They may push for physical closeness as a way of reconnecting, not understanding that for you, physical closeness follows emotional safety, not the other way around. That asking for physical closeness before the emotional rupture has been addressed is asking you to build on a foundation that isn't there yet. This is one of the most important things for you to be able to communicate to the people in your life, and one of the most important things for the people in your life to understand about you. The sequence matters. Emotional safety is not a bonus feature of good relationships for you. It is the structural foundation. Everything else is built on it. When it is present, everything is available. When it is absent, the rest cannot function as it's supposed to. And if you have been in relationships where this was not understood, where your need for emotional safety before closeness was treated as an obstacle or a manipulation or a sign of your damage, I want you to hear something clearly. That was not a failure of your needs. That was a failure of compatibility or a failure of understanding, or both. Your needs are not unreasonable. They are not too much. They are simply specific, and specific needs require specific understanding. Not everyone will be able to provide that, but the right people will. And the right people will not just tolerate your need for emotional safety. They will recognize it as one of the most honest and self-aware things about you. There is a concept worth naming here that many of you may recognize when you hear it. Psychologists who work in the area of attachment theory describe what is sometimes called emotional attunement. the capacity of one person to genuinely perceive and respond to the emotional state of another. For people who need emotional safety before closeness, attunement is not just a nice quality in a partner, it is a prerequisite. Because what you are actually assessing in all that careful scanning your nervous system does is whether this person is capable of attunement, whether they can perceive what is real in you and respond to it with care, whether they are present enough, honest enough, emotionally available enough to meet you where you actually are, rather than where it would be convenient for them for you to be. And when you find someone who is capable of that, when genuine attunement is present between you, the quality of what becomes possible is something that most people, moving through their relationships with less sensitivity and less requirement, may never fully access. Not because they're incapable of it, but because they've never been required by their own nature to wait for it. You have been required to wait, and waiting, as painful as it has sometimes been, has preserved in you the capacity for something extraordinary. Let's talk about what it means to live in a world that doesn't always honor this. The pressure to be casual about closeness is not neutral. It is cultural. It is historical. It is tied to particular ideas about what maturity and sophistication look like in the domain of intimacy. And those ideas have real consequences for people whose nervous systems don't conform to them. You have probably felt those consequences in the way conversations about your love life sometimes feel like you're being gently diagnosed, in the way certain kinds of advice, just put yourself out there, just see what happens, just go with the flow, land as completely inapplicable to how you actually work. In the way you've sometimes had to choose between being honest about what you need and fitting into a social narrative that doesn't have space for it. The cultural expectation that physical closeness should be easily separable from emotional depth is not a universal truth about human nature. It is a particular story that a particular culture tells at a particular moment in time. And like all cultural stories, it serves some people and leaves others behind. It leaves behind the people for whom the physical and the emotional are not separable, for whom closeness is always, inevitably, deeply an emotional event, for whom the body and the heart do not operate in separate compartments that can be opened and closed independently. And here is what I want to say about that, as clearly and directly as I can. The fact that culture has not made sufficient space for the way you experience intimacy does not mean that the way you experience intimacy is wrong. It means that culture has not caught up to the full range of human experience. It means that the dominant narrative is incomplete. Your experience is not a deviation from the norm that needs to be corrected. Your experience is evidence that the norm is too narrow to contain the full complexity of what human beings are capable of feeling. There is a kind of loneliness that comes with being wired this way in a world that doesn't fully recognize it. A loneliness not just of not being understood by others, but of sometimes not having language for yourself, of knowing that something about how you work is different, without having the words to explain it in a way that doesn't sound like an excuse or a defense mechanism, of carrying a need that feels enormous and legitimate inside you, while the world keeps suggesting you should be able to need less. If you have felt that loneliness, I want you to know that it is real, that it is not self-pity or oversensitivity. It is the genuine experience of being a particular kind of person in a world that has not yet fully learned to see you. And the fact that you have continued to hold out for what you actually need in the face of all that pressure to settle for less or to override your own requirements is not stubbornness or difficulty. It is integrity. It is the deepest kind of self-respect. It is the refusal to betray what you know to be true about yourself in order to fit a story that was never written for you. What finally gave you permission to stop apologizing for needing what you need? If there was a moment, a conversation, a realization, something someone said or something you read, I'd really love to hear it in the comments. Those moments of permission matter, and sharing yours might be exactly what someone else is waiting to read. Now let's turn to something that is perhaps the most nuanced part of all of this: the relationship between needing emotional safety and the fear of being overwhelmed by intimacy once it arrives. Because here is a paradox that many of you live inside. You need emotional safety before closeness. But once closeness is present, once the safety has been established and the gates have opened, the intensity of what you feel can be almost overwhelming. The very sensitivity that required safety as a precondition is now fully engaged with the experience of intimacy. And fully engaged for a nervous system like yours means something different than it means for most people. It can mean that a moment of genuine connection feels almost too big to hold. That the emotion that arises in the presence of real intimacy is so full, so complete, so present in your entire body that you don't quite know what to do with it. That you sometimes need to step back, not because you've stopped wanting closeness, but because your system needs to process what it has just experienced before it can receive more. This is sometimes called overstimulation, and it is not a sign that the intimacy was too much or that you made a mistake in opening. It is a sign that your system is processing something significant at full capacity. The challenge is that this need for periodic withdrawal can be misread by partners as inconsistency or ambivalence. You were so present, so connected, so open, and then suddenly you needed space. And to someone who doesn't understand the architecture of your experience, that shift can feel like a betrayal or a withdrawal of care. It is neither. It is simply your nervous system doing what it needs to do to sustain, over time, the quality of connection you both want. Learning to communicate this, to give your partner language for what is happening when you need to step back after intensity, is one of the most important skills available to you. Not because you owe anyone an explanation for your needs, but because the people who love you deserve to understand that your withdrawal is not about them. It is about your system regulating itself so that it can return renewed and present to the connection you share. Jung wrote about the importance of what he called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming more fully and authentically yourself. integrating the different dimensions of your psyche into a coherent whole. For people who need emotional safety before closeness, individuation in the domain of intimacy means something specific. It means learning to remain yourself, grounded in your own experience, your own body, your own emotional reality, even in the midst of deep connection with another person, not dissolving into the other person's emotional field, not losing track of where you end and they begin, not taking on their emotional state as if it were your own. This is not about being less present or less open. It is about being present and open from a stable foundation, about experiencing intimacy fully without being swept away by it, about remaining the person you are, with your own needs and boundaries and interior life, even while being genuinely, deeply connected to someone else. And this is the work that makes the kind of intimacy you're capable of sustainable over time. Because intensity without groundedness is exhausting. Connection without selfhood is ultimately self-erasing. The goal is not to feel less, but to feel from a place of sufficient stability that what you feel enriches rather than depletes you. When you develop that groundedness, something shifts in how you relate to your own need for emotional safety. It stops feeling like a limitation and starts feeling like what it always was. Wisdom, the natural expression of a nervous system that knows what it needs to function at its best. You stop apologizing for the requirement and start trusting it. You stop trying to override it and start honoring it. And in honoring it, you become clearer about who in your life is genuinely capable of meeting it and who is not. And that clarity is not coldness. It is not selectivity for its own sake. It is the natural result of understanding yourself well enough to know what actually works for you. Because here is what becomes possible when you stop fighting your own nature and start working with it. The relationships you do enter, the connections that do meet the conditions your nervous system requires, become something extraordinary. They become the kind of intimacy that most people spend their whole lives looking for and never quite find. Not because they're incapable of it, but because they've never been required to build on the right foundation. You have always been building on the right foundation. The requirement for emotional safety, the insistence on trust before vulnerability, the refusal to open before the conditions were genuinely right. All of that has been preparation. All of that has been the preservation of something in you that is capable of real, deep, transformative connection. And the people who will recognize that, who will understand what it means that you need to feel safe before you can feel anything else, who will not experience your requirement as a burden, but as an invitation to build something real. Those people exist. They may be rarer than you'd like. They may take longer to find than the culture's timeline suggests they should. But they exist. And when you find them, when genuine safety is established between you and everything that has been waiting quietly behind the gates of your careful, intelligent, protective nervous system begins to open, what becomes available is not ordinary closeness. It is the kind of contact that transforms both people, the kind that Jung described, the kind that leaves both people changed. You are not too guarded. You are not too slow. You are not too complicated or too much or too anything. You are someone who knows at a level deeper than conscious thought that closeness matters. That intimacy is not casual. That what passes between two people when they are genuinely open to each other is significant, is sacred even, and deserves to be entered with care. That knowledge has probably cost you something. It has probably meant watching others move through connection more easily, more casually, with less apparent weight. It has probably meant periods of loneliness that felt sharper because you knew what you were capable of feeling and hadn't yet found the conditions in which to feel it. It has probably meant moments of self-doubt, of wondering whether your requirements were reasonable or whether you were simply afraid. But here is what that knowledge has also given you. It has given you integrity in the domain of your own heart. It has given you the capacity for depth that cannot be manufactured or hurried. It has given you a quality of presence in genuine connection that is rare and real and worth everything it has cost to preserve. You needed to feel safe before you could feel anything else. That was never your dysfunction. That was your psyche protecting what matters most. And what matters most in you is worth protecting. It always was. If someone in your life is quietly carrying this, someone who has been called too guarded or too slow to open, someone who has wondered for years whether something is wrong with them, consider sending them this. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for another person is hand them the language for something they've never been able to name. That small act of sharing can open a door that's been closed for a very long time. If this video helped you feel seen in something you've carried quietly for a long time, I hope you'll stay. There is more here, more language for the experiences that have been hardest to name, more understanding for the parts of yourself you've wondered about. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And if you feel safe to do so, share something in the comments. Your story, your recognition, even just a word that says, yes, this is me. Someone out there is watching and needs your voice to feel a little less alone in this. Thank you for watching. The psychology of the empath who feels everything is waiting for you next. If the sensitivity described in this video resonates, that one goes even deeper into what it means to move through the world, absorbing what others barely notice, and why that has always been a gift, not a flaw.